service unless you are called on to share during joys and concerns or the after service. And if you have a personal chalice, please gather it now so you can light yours when we light ours. Before beginning our service, we'll hear from our committee and/or event chairs regarding upcoming events and opportunities for connection with our community and with each other. Now, Ann Packham will monitor that for us.
Good morning, everyone. Well, this is an opportunity for any committee chairs to tell us what's going on with their committees. So I saw Sarah first and then Carl will be second. Sarah, you want to go ahead?
Sure, thank you. For the covenant groups, we are going to be letting people move from one covenant group to another if their schedule has changed or something has changed in their life. And this is also a time for people who have not been in a covenant group in the past, but would like to be in one now to go ahead and join one. So I'm going to put my email in the chat and you can contact me if you want to join one. And I will be having a form for people that want to switch from one to another within the next couple of days, and that'll be in Notable News, and I'll also post it in the chat next time. So we'll have a couple of weeks of announcements for people that want to join or switch, and then we'll go ahead and do that all in 1 week. So I'll put my email in the chat. Say again, Paula?
How much does it cost?
It costs a little bit of attention, some kindness, and willingness to listen. I think we can all afford that.
I think that sounds like a bargain, Sarah. I love my covenant group. So I was sorry to miss it last week. So go ahead, Carl Packham, you want to talk about facilities?
Yes, Carl Packham for Facilities and Grounds, coming to you live from JFK. We had our monthly work day yesterday, so I just wanted to give a quick shout out to the following: Dave and Julie Simons, Derek, Lorraine, and Martha, who came out, and we achieved a lot of good things. Probably the most important one to the congregation is we are now officially a fellowship on the side of our building. So that is some good news. So we have an accurate sign now on the main building. That's all my news.
Thank you. Any other committee chairs? I'm looking for either physical or virtual hands. I see Martha's hand went up.
Yes, thank you. I'm representing the SAC committee this morning. Mary Ann's at an all-day conference, so she asked me to update our members on the legislative issues. Hopefully a lot of you signed up for your individual alerts with
Maybe somebody should tell Ann she's frozen.
Oh, sorry. I just muted myself, but I didn't.
Okay.
Go ahead, Martha.
So the boots on the, I'm sorry, where was I? Legislative. I hope that people signed up individually with the UUJF. You'll get your own alerts, but if not, there are the HB1, the Combating Violence, the new anti-protesting bill is going to be voted on this week, as well as the HB 259 allowing concealed weapons in religious institutions, and the one HB 7005 disallowing any claims for negligence due to COVID protocols for business. So they're all, in our opinion, against our values. You can read about them on the UUJF site, and please take time to send a message to your Congress people to vote no, especially on HB1. And for the boots on the ground this month, we still have some opportunity left on Friday, the 26th. We have the 25th filled up with 6 volunteers. Thank you very much, at the Christian Service Center. So we need to let Brian know by Tuesday morning about Friday. So it was in the Notable News again, or you can always reach out to me. And if you are available to join anytime between 9:30 and 1 on Friday, please let us know. We'll be making meals and serving them to the population downtown. And if you're unable to participate in person, please also check the link in the Notable News for making individual snack packs or hygiene packs that we're happy to pick up from you anytime during March or April to take down there as well. So thank you.
Thank you, Martha. Thanks for the Social Action Committee for organizing all those opportunities for us to get involved. While I'm looking for other hands raised, I'll just go ahead and jump in that the women's group has shifted our plans. So if you saw in the notable news at some point, we were planning to meet originally in person on Friday at church, believe it or not. But because of the overlap with the Social Action Committee and the fact that it's going to be like 90 degrees on Friday, we've decided to just go to a virtual Zoom gathering Friday evening at 7. I will send out an email with the Zoom link. Roberta is going to be the hostess with the mostest. And so join us, and I'll put my email in the chat when I'm not doing this thing anymore. Any other committee? I'm not seeing any physical hands or any of the virtual hands. So I think it's back to you, Martha.
Thank you, Anne. Thank you. And thank you everyone who shared. Please let us know if you'd like to receive our weekly newsletter by putting your email in the chat or by visiting our website, universityuus.org, selecting the Connect tab and completing the contact information. We'll get you added to the list so you can see every week what's going on. My opening words today are from the UU minister, Katie Romano Griffin. Come, let us enter this space of hope and community. Come, let us enter this space with our sorrows, our joys, our passion and compassion. Come, let us enter this space with the stories of our ancestors, for their strength and wisdom beats in our hearts. Come into this space, present to the beloved companions who move beside us. Come into this space, mindful that together we are building a future for other generations. Come into this space and let us worship. Our opening music this morning is Love Will Guide Us. The music arranged by Betty Wilder, words by Sally Roger, and sung by the Twin City Women's Choir.
Love will guide us.
We light our chalice this morning along with thousands of other UU congregations, knowing that when we light the chalice in worship, we illuminate a world that we feel called upon to serve with love and a sense of justice. Please join me in lighting your own chalice and saying these words together. In the light of truth and the warmth of love, we gather to seek, to sustain, and to share. Together, let's affirm our congregational covenant by repeating these words. Love is the spirit of this church, and service is its gift. This is our great covenant, to dwell together in peace, to seek truth in love, and to help one another. To our guests, friends, and members, we're glad you're here and hope we'll have the opportunity to connect more deeply during future services and community events. Our services each week help us live into our Unitarian Universalist principles, both personally and in the world. Please join us often to learn all that this fellowship and this wonderful faith have to offer. This next part of our service is one of our most honored traditions, the sharing of personal joys or concerns with each other. This section is not streamed. Here we lift each other up with joy and share in the heartache and sorrows and honor our own beloved community.
everybody who chose to share what's on their heart today. And if we would all hold up the people who have joys or concerns in their lives, which really is all of us in one way or another. So be kind to the people around you as they go through their lives, and hopefully they will be kind to you as you go through your joys and concerns as well. Thank you.
Thank you, Sarah. We have a vibrant religious education program here and a wonderful director who helps bring our faith alive for our youth and for us. And today she is playing with our youth, or I'm sure teaching them at church. So she is not here this morning. So I'm going to stand in for Judith Stein Farrell and share a story. And I believe it's called I Am Enough. It speaks to our third principle and the topic of today's sermon as well. So let's enjoy this together. I am enough. Like the sun, I'm here to shine. Like the voice, I'm here to sing. Like the bird, I'm here to fly and soar high over everything. Like the trees, I'm here to grow. Like the mountains, here to stand. Like time, I'm here to be and be everything I can. Like the champ, I'm here to fight. Like the heart, I'm here to love. Like a ladder, here to climb, and like the air, to rise above. Like the wind, I'm here to push. Like a rope, I'm here to pull. Like the rain, I'm here to pour and drip and fall until I'm full. Like the moon, I'm here to dream. Like the student, here to learn. Like the water, here to swell. Like the fire, here to burn. Like the winner, I'm here to win. And if I don't, get up again. I know that I may sometimes cry, but even then, I'm here to try. I'm not meant to be like you. You're not meant to be like me. Sometimes we will get along, and sometimes we will disagree. I know that we don't look the same. Our skin, our eyes, our hair, our frame. But that does not dictate our worth. We both have places here on earth. And in the end, we are right here to live a life of love, not fear. To help each other when it's tough. To say together, I am enough. Thanks to Judith for that wonderful story for us. As you listen to a portion of Handel's water music, please visit our website or make a note to do so later. Our offering each week helps support the ongoing needs of our congregation and is shared with an organization chosen by our social action team. For March and April, we are supporting the Christian Service Center in downtown Orlando. Thank you for giving as generously as you are able. Thank you, Patrick. For a second there, I was worried you might leave it unresolved. That's a beautiful piece, though. Reverend Tracie Barrett is a familiar voice for many of us. She is an ordained Unitarian Universalist minister and considers herself an evangelist for the good news that is our liberal faith. Thank you for sharing your wisdom this morning with us, Tracie. It's all yours.
All righty, thank you. In 2014, the incoming class to Meadville Lombard Theological School was the largest it had been in the recent history. We were a class of 31 students from all walks of life, some entering their first career, some entering their second, third, or more. For me, ministry is my third career. The average age of that incoming class was mid to late 30s to early 40s. We had a few classmates who were in their 20s, straight out of undergrad, and a few who were in their 60s. And out of that group, we had 24 who identified as female. After 3 years of intensive studying and learning and internships, the class got a bit smaller as people dropped to part-time or decided that ministry wasn't actually for them. And we picked up others who had been on their own part-time tracks. Our graduating class had 21 who identified as female out of 24 graduating. These days, this high number of women and women-identified ministers within Unitarian Universalism is not that big of a deal. We have ministers who identify as male, female, gender fluid, transgender, and all along the spectrum of gender identity. And to me, it's part of the beautiful tapestry that makes Unitarian Universalism unique and beautiful. It wasn't always that way, though. Like many denominations, our ministerial ranks in the beginning were full of men, for it was seen as only a duty that men could fulfill. Women in ministry were regulated to being Sunday school teachers, ministers' wives, and heading the women's groups. This changed in the late 1800s. Olympia Brown, known as the first woman ordained in Unitarian Universalist Ministry, has 2 readings in our hymnal, but the first one, number 569, is the most well-known. In fact, I had it quoted in my ordination order of service. And I want to read it because it's important. She says, "Stand by this faith, work for it and sacrifice for it. There is nothing in all the world so important as to be loyal to this faith, which has placed before us the loftiest ideals, which has comforted us in sorrow, strengthened us for noble duty, and made the world beautiful. Do not demand immediate results, but rejoice that we are worthy to be entrusted with this great message, that you are strong enough to work for a great true principle without counting the cost. Go on finding ever new applications of these truths and new enjoyments in their contemplation, always trusting in the one God which ever lives and loves." Now, she was the first woman to be ordained, but not the first woman preacher. Lydia Ann Jenkins was married to a Universalist minister in upstate New York, and in 1857 was reported to be preaching to good acceptance. While she received a lot of backlash, in 1858, she was a speaker at the New York State Universalist Convention. Shortly after that, she and her husband became co-pastors in Clinton, New York, and then became itinerant preachers. Olympia Brown is more well-known because she was ordained, and her ministry lasted much longer. She was ordained in 1863 after finishing seminary at St. Lawrence College. Her ministry focused on women's suffrage, and she lived long enough to vote in an election. So yes, the Universalists ordained women ministers. However, it's important to remember that our Unitarian ancestors did as well. Remember, prior to 1960, we were separate. According to author Cynthia Grant Tucker, quote, "The Universalists who maintained that salvation was open to all had harnessed to their iconoclasm a loose institutional structure and a tradition of experiment that relaxed the historical strictures on women and gave them more latitude in public service. The Unitarians, more individualistic, cerebral, and cityfied, also brought with them a strong commitment to freedom of thought, stressed education, and insisted on a rational reading of scripture. Rejecting original sin, they absolved Eve of having corrupted the race. Discarding the Trinity and placing Jesus on an entirely human plane, they allowed for a more androgynous concept of deity. At least in this creedal revamping of Orthodox Christian constructions, liberal religion released women from their inferior station and cleared the way for their ascent in the church. In the 1870s, Mary Safford and Eleanor Gordon, two friends who started a church in Hamilton, Iowa, met Jenkins Lloyd Jones. Jones was the Unitarian's Western secretary and was tasked with finding clergy to work in his district. For both Jones and his predecessor, it was almost impossible to get male clergy to fill pulpits in the West. Jones became Safford and Gordon's ally. Jones asked Mary Safford if she would be willing to serve the parish in Humboldt, Iowa. Eleanor Gordon worked primarily as a teacher and as Safford's parish assistant. And when Jones asked them to go to Humboldt, they discovered that, well, the town also needed a principal for the school, so it was settled. What I found interesting in my research was that Safford seemed to set up a halftime ministry with lay-led services. Tucker, in her book Prophetic Sisterhood, relates that Mary Safford preached on alternate Sundays in another town about 28 miles away. And she continues, the vacancy that this arrangement created in Humboldt every other week inspired a novel system of lay preaching that proved so beneficial that other societies in the area started to use it. The idea was to have 5 or 6 members take turns conducting the programs using initially borrowed sermons by favorite preachers like Channing and Emerson. And the papers presented were seldom original, just the opportunity to lead the services and preach gave the stand-ins a pulpit apprenticeship that stood the church in good stead for many years. Sound familiar? This was the start of a legacy that I've seen in many Unitarian Universalist congregations to this day, including yours. Full-time, half-time, quarter-time, no time, it doesn't seem to matter. Congregations around this country fill their pulpits on Sundays the minister is off, or every Sunday if they don't have a minister, with lay-led people who use that time to learn how to be in the pulpit. It's actually how I rediscovered my own call to ministry. I covered a Sunday in my home congregation when our halftime minister was off, and the rest is history. Eleanor Gordon, Mary Safford's friend and assistant, filled in as a substitute on a regular basis. And it was during this time that she grew in her own confidence and eventually gave sermons of her own in the pulpit in Humboldt. In 1889, Gordon was ordained in the ministry and became Mary Safford's associate minister. The Humboldt parish became a magnet for women called to the ministry. It also began to serve as a hub for a pastoral network spreading throughout Iowa and the neighboring states. So who are some of these women? Thanks to Cynthia Grant Tucker's work, these women are not lost to history. Mary Safford was recognized as the driving force behind the Iowa Sisterhood, the group of women serving the parishes in this area. And in addition to serving congregations in Humboldt, Sioux City, and Des Moines, she also organized 7 more congregations and made them self-supporting. When she retired, she moved to Orlando and took on the leadership of the suffrage campaigns in both Iowa and here in Florida. And her dear friend Eleanor Gordon began as a teacher, and after being ordained in 1889, moved off to serve parishes independently for a while. After working in women's suffrage, she returned to full-time ministry in 1912, serving the newly formed church in Orlando. And yeah, that'd be our neighbor, First Unitarian Orlando. Eleanor Gordon was their first minister in 1912. Ida Holton came to Iowa to serve the congregation that Mary Safford served half-time in addition to Humboldt. She worked to recruit young women into the ministry. She was ordained at Des Moines in 1886 and remained in the Midwest until the turn of the century. After retiring in 1960, she moved to Massachusetts and served 2 more parishes. Rowena Morse was the last of the women to be ordained and considered part of the Frontier Sisterhood. She was recruited and encouraged into ministry by Ida Holton. However, she was also part of the group that was forced into early retirement. Ultimately, 21 Unitarian women served the parishes of the Great Plains. 21. Now, as I mentioned at the beginning of my sermon, that number is the same as the graduating women in my seminary class. One seminary class, 142 years later, 21 women. Now, before you think that our ranks simply grew as the years went on, know that it was not that easy. Remember a few weeks ago when I preached on our history around race. We don't always do the right thing. The only way to change our future is to admit to the mistakes of our past and make different choices. And this time was no different. The Iowa Sisterhood was not always viewed as a good thing. Sure, they took the parishes that no one else in the East wanted. They took a non-academic pastoral approach to ministry. The women, however, were seen as an embarrassment among the clergy back in Boston. Tucker points out that at the start of the 20th century, America itself was reacting against its cultural emasculation of the 19th century. The Unitarian Church was feeling this too. Liberal preachers had been easy targets for critics because they had no creed. Tucker says, once deprived of their former political clout and forced to court an overwhelmingly female constituency, liberal preachers felt exiled from the viral world of male power and leadership. As the church's womanly ambience began to attract a gentler, more delicate breed of minister, often men bereft of executive skills who found it a haven from public pressures, the more robust, fearing for their masculinity, fled from the field. With this trend at the start of the 20th century, an average of 15 men a year were leaving Unitarian ministry. So when Sam Elliott began to work within the AUA, he was prepared to lead in a more manly way. To say that he and Mary Safford, who at this time was the secretary of the Iowa Unitarian Association, butted heads would be an understatement. Once Safford's term ended, Elliott simply ignored the women already in pulpits and moved to keep other women from coming into parishes. In 1906, Elliott wanted to see the Unitarians open a school for parish assistants to allow women who had potential for service careers with the church somewhere to do it wisely and successfully. While the Iowa Sisterhood protested this idea, they were largely ignored and the project went forward. However, due to the changing nature of the world, the school had few students and fewer graduates. Those who did went on to do social work rather than ministry, as it both paid more and had more standing. In relation to the end of their ministries, Tucker says about the women of the Sisterhood, what made their lives hardest was not their real disabilities, but being treated as if they had outstayed their welcome and were in the way. She continues, the most painful part of these messages was that the ministry still saw itself as a brotherhood and was doing its best to disown them and delete their past from its record. Because church boards were so in line with the AUA's attitude around women in ministry, from 1906, when Rowena Morse was ordained, no other woman was brought into active Unitarian ministry until 1917. That minister, Clara Cook Helvey, and she found a position because her cousin, who used his clout on her behalf, was William Howard Taft, former president and prominent Unitarian lay leader. Allison Cornish and Jackie Clement in their 2011 UUA Tapestry of Faith curriculum, Faith Like a River, have this to say about the last days of the Iowa Sisterhood. Most of the women ministers were rushed into retirement. Others left to pursue work in peace, suffrage, and social work movements. Yet they remained vocal to the end about the rights of women and the place of church in society. It was not a large movement, nor was it long-lasting. The Iowa Sisterhood did not radically alter the possibilities for women in Unitarian ministry. But in its time and place, it was a shining vision of women called to minister and men called to support their work. Tucker ends her book with these great words that, for me, sum up the lessons from the Prophetic Sisterhood. Finally, the record of these prophetic sisters serves to remind us that even where there is much to mourn in our past, there may be much to celebrate also. For where women have cast their lives in the terms that they and not others have set for them, their stories of struggle will speak to us of inspiring human achievement and bravery. As a legacy, then, this shared history has no conclusion, but only takes pause, defying the kind of closure that the world has too long imposed on the female destiny and bidding us all to create freer, authentic narrative for the future. May we continue their legacy and continue to be brave, creating a future they and we will be proud of. Amen. May it be so, and blessed be.
Thank you, Tracie. That was a lot of information and a lot of good history, especially about Eleanor Gordon. I didn't know that, the start of our own Orlando UU.
Yeah, I was surprised when that came up. I was like, oh, wait, that's next door.
We know that, yes, yeah. It's a little early in service, and we don't normally ask you if you'd like to take questions, but I'm asking this morning, would you mind if anyone has a few questions before we close?
Sure, that'd be great.
Great. I have a question, Martha.
Okay, Roy, go ahead.
Tracie, that was excellent and very enlightening. Thank you so much for your presentation. I'm wondering, do you have any idea, you probably do, what percentage of Unitarian ministers now, your words, identify as female versus those who identify as male? I'm guessing it's tipped I would guess 75% to 25% women to men.
It's actually around 50%, 50 to 55% right now, yeah.
Okay.
It's shifting as older white male ministers retire. There's a lot more women identified coming through seminary, but we are still seeing, male identified ministers as well. And so I think it's running about 50, 55, 45, somewhere in that range. We're not taking over yet. And that's where I would like to see it be. I really want to see it right there at kind of 50-50. I identify with the Iowa Sisterhood and their way of preaching. I always say my sermons have no footnotes. I don't usually give book report sermons. They're always very touchy-feely, pastoral. And so when I read that, I was like, oh, there is a place for me. I identify more as Universalist than Unitarian anyway. I mean, I am a Unitarian as well, but I shift more Olympia Brown than Mary Safford. So it's that kind of ministry that is starting to show up. And, I have a lot of female colleagues who write very detailed intellectual sermons as well. So I think that's shifting too, that we're seeing that become, it depends on the individual and what kind of minister you're going to get and what kind of message you're going to get each Sunday. So it's really, interesting that it is still about 50-50.
Yeah, thank you.
You're welcome. Thank you for the question.
Evelyn?
Yeah, I am wondering, this obviously is a changed system, and I'm wondering what years did you possibly, or I don't think I heard that part, Tracie, when things began to change and become more what they are now with a 50-50 arrangement? When did the women start to be a little bit more involved?
I want to say probably after the merger, we started to see the Women's Federation came about, and I think that helped to start kind of nudging women into ministry. But I'm not sure. So I'd probably say 60s, 70s, we started to see more women come into ministry. And now it's definitely, kind of that 50-50 stage. But I think it's been slow, but it started probably after the merger.
Wondered if it evolved with the more of the women's movement in terms of that kind of thinking, because previously when Unitarian ministers were referred to as being very liberal, it was like, well, that depends on how you want to use that term.
Exactly. But yeah, I think it was probably around the women's movement. I know the Women's Federation has been around since I want to say 60s or 70s. But that would be, I think, where it really kind of sparked, and that idea that there was room for us too in the pulpit. And it's still hard. Like when I was in seminary, one of my professors, Nicole Kirk, sat us all down one day and she's like, so men, I'm going to be talking to our female identified ministers for a moment, but I want you to hear this. And it is, you're going to face some real prejudice in the pulpit. People are going to comment on your hair or what you're wearing, or if you've gained weight or this or that or the other. And I can guarantee you that, yes, that has happened to me. You know, I've had talkbacks that come that instead of it being about my sermon is about what I was wearing that day and how lovely it was. And it made, you know, and so there's still, you know, 2021, we still have that issue, you know,
Well-
and so it's frustrating, but it's still there. It's still very real.
I hear this also from, there are now quite a few women rabbis
Mhm.
and other lay ministers. So, you know, it's like it's growing, but it's been, as usual, hard for every group.
Yeah. And so it's, you know, it's important, but it is definitely, there are still a lot of challenges there. So.
No, I have one before I ask Anne. I heard you use the word liberal religion, and not to put you on the spot, but can you give a short definition of that? We've had some discussions lately that it might be off-putting, and I know it means something different than political. And if you
Yeah.
could just briefly.
So in religion, and this is going to be, you know, off the top of my head, please don't quote me. You've got conservative religion and you have liberal religion. And usually in the conservative religion are end of the spectrum, because like anything, it's a spectrum, are people who believe in the inerrancy of the word, that it is, you know, scripture comes from God, that there are very strict tenets of how we're going to live, and it's all based in the Bible. And when you come into the more liberal, it is where, you know, where we as Unitarians and Universalists and where the Quakers came up, like all of our Congregationalist ancestors started more center, and then some of us trickled over into the liberal side, which was, hey, you can't keep people as property. Hey, you can't tell women what to do. They're not property either, you know, and it's more of a relational, if we're talking religion, that's usually where you will hear, you know, that your relationship with God, source, universe, whatever you want to call it, is yours. And I as a minister cannot dictate that. That becomes part of that liberal religion side, where it's more experiential, you know, what you're experiencing, then here's your dogma and creed, and you have to follow these things rigidly to it. So it's similar in the terms for the political spectrum, but it's not necessarily tied to the political spectrum. You know, I know many people who are liberal Christians, but are also pro-life and are against abortion and are against, you know, so it's different, but it's sort of similar. I hope that helps.
It does. I always remember that Revelation is open and continuous. And that's my favorite aspect of liberal
Or a
religion.
living tradition, and everything can change. So that's great.
So I saw Anne and then Beth, and then.
I just wondered if in your seminary class or in general, are you seeing any more racial or ethnic diversity within ministers?
We're getting there. It's hard though, because, you know, congregations are still not open. They say they are. A lot of them say they are, but they're not. I have two friends, seminary friends, who were called and settled into congregations. They're female. Both of them are leaving. With one before the first year was up. One, I think she's in her second or third year. I have friends who are people of color who have left their congregations because of constant microaggressions. So it's really tough. You know, Meadville, I know, is growing in diversity because they actively seek it. They'll go out and really work on attracting students. But it's still, we're throwing them into the lion's den. You know, like I get worried for, you know, anyone in any kind of marginalized group, whether that's race or whether that's, you know, gender issues, anything like that. They are still it's scary. You know, we as congregations have a lot of work to do, you know, that, and to work on our own stuff and then be able to actually be open for that. So,
Thank you.
but it's getting there.
Beth? You're muted. Unmute, Beth.
Tracie, I really dislike labels. It really bothers me. And one of the ones I dislike the most is the word liberal, because it has so many connotations. It's just so broad. And I like it, the word progressive instead of liberal, because it means to me you can think ahead, you can move ahead, and you're thinking thoughts and that can move you. And how do you feel about that?
I agree. I mean, the liberal term is our historical term, right? So there's a nod to history to say liberal. I use them, I'll switch back and forth sometimes, but because we are known in our, you know, association paperwork and all of that stuff as a liberal faith, that's why I use that term. Because I kind of hate labels too, because again, everybody has their own meanings to words. And so it's very difficult, but you know, it's who right now we call ourselves, but I do agree. I like the word progressive better. And I think we could start shifting to that. I wouldn't be offended at all. So, but when I use the term liberal, I'm basing it off of, you know, the history and the constant books I'm reading now. So, in our,
I think Lake County uses the word
association
progressive now
paperwork
on
and
their
all of that
website,
stuff as a liberal faith.
which is nice. That's where Tracie was immediately the past minister. Yeah.
Immediately after seminary, like graduated May 20th and opened the building May 27th. So yeah, immediately.
That's a great place to start. Yeah.
They are lovely people, and I keep my eye on them. I'm still subscribed to the newsletter. So.
One more question, Evelyn, go ahead.
Yeah, I just wanted to say that I always find it disappointing, being a word person, that the word itself gets distorted into the way it is used and the way it is associated. Because if you really think of the thorough meaning of the word liberal, it means open always to new things, as opposed to these days, of course, it's blasted politically as, you know, a certain way of thinking, but that certain way of thinking means open to new ideas. So it's a matter of how it is used both in the media and how people have used it untraditionally. So I think that the word started out as being perfectly acceptable until people decide to misuse, abuse, or whatever with the word itself.
Absolutely. And it's actually in the title of the book that Cynthia Grant Tucker wrote, because I had it here sitting next to me for a paper, is Prophetic Sisterhood, Liberal Women Ministers of the Frontier from 1880 to 1930. So it's a great book. I highly recommend it. I had to read it for school here in the thing. And I'm reading it again for school again. So because now I'm in a doctoral program, so I'm super busy and reading all the things.
Yes.
Very good. Okay, one more, Paula, and then we're going to move on.
Okay, I'll be the last. The word, as we're talking about words, the word liberal also means generous, as in spreading out one's gifts, whatever they might be, liberally. And so that comes into, to me, that comes into play when we're thinking about how we use our words.
We can just use both, liberal and progressive. Let's just cover all of them.
Sure.
Yeah.
Problem solved.
We have big enough vocabularies that we can keep both of them in there and they fit.
There you go.
Good idea. All right. Well, thank you so much, Tracie. It's always a pleasure to have you. And we'll close now, and then you're welcome to stay for a little bit longer if you like. Let's extinguish our chalice as we say these words together. We extinguish this flame, but not the light of truth, the warmth of community, or the fire of commitment. These we carry in our hearts until we are together again. And now we'll enjoy closing music from UU Jason Shelton, The Fire of Commitment.
From the light of days remembered burns a beacon bright and clear, guiding hands and hearts and spirits into faith set free from fear. When the fire of commitment sets our mind and soul ablaze, when our hunger and our passion meet to call us on our way, when we live with deep assurance of the flame that burns within, then our promise finds fulfillment and our future can begin. From the stories of our living rings a song both brave and free, calling pilgrims still to witness to the life of liberty. When the fire of commitment sets our mind and soul ablaze, when our hunger and our passion need to call us on our way, when we live with deep assurance of the flame that burns within, then our promise finds fulfillment and our future can begin. From the dreams of youthful vision comes a new prophetic voice, which demands a deeper justice built by our courageous choice. When the fire of commitment sets our mind and soul ablaze, when our hunger and our passion need to call us on our way, when we live with deep assurance of the flame that burns within, then our promise finds fulfillment and our future can begin.
That is a beautiful piece of music. And I remember your ordination, Tracie, as I was there. It was terrific. Our closing words today come from UU Minister Rise Williams. Remembering our spiritual, courageous ancestors who forsook oppression with security to gain freedom with opportunity. May we go forth to master ourselves by accepting duty with responsibility, by showing balance in our judgments, and by having breadth of vision in our deliberations. May we be exemplars of that spirit, moving forward with conviction and commitment, with unity and without uniformity, with brotherhood, sisterhood, personhood, to serve the truth that sets us free. Amen. Please stay with us a little longer for conversation and camaraderie, and perhaps some more questions for Reverend Tracie or each other.